Today, Lancer Media is here with a very special guest.
Hello, I'm Dr. Reid, the Fairfax County Public School Division Superintendent, and I'm so excited to be visiting John R. Lewis High School.
Before being sworn in as Fairfax County Public School Superintendent on July 1st, 2022, Dr. Reid was the superintendent of the North Shore School District in Washington State, where she won the American Association of School Administrators National Superintendent of the Year Award for her work in 2021. Since joining the FCPS team this year, Dr. Reid has worked to improve the county by visiting schools and connecting with students. She joins us to share her thoughts on a number of topics of interest to students at Lewis and the entire Fairfax community.
We are here at a school that is home to many students of different cultural, racial, and ethnic backgrounds. We're a school that shows a lot of diversity in the student population. So what can Lewis High School in particular expect to see from FCPS regarding inclusion and diversity in the classroom and curriculum?
So thank you for the question, and thanks for hosting me here today. I consider the diversity both of John R. Lewis High School and Fairfax County to be such a tremendous strength to solve the problems that we have today and that we have into the future. A diverse body of thinking, different ways of approaching decisions, different perspectives are so important. So I'm just excited about the possibilities.
Oh, that's awesome. And at this school also, we in 2020, we had a name change after a student-led initiative, which is so awesome,
Nice.
and a vote from the FCPS school board to honor the late Congressman John R. Lewis, who was also a civil rights activist, and his activism started very young. He was a student when he was an activist, and he advocated for students' voices all his life. How do you plan to incorporate student voices into your planning and your goal and your vision for FCPS as you're a superintendent here?
Well, so right now, we're in this huge strategic planning process, and it's my expectation that every student who got that survey link actually filled it out, so I'm going to be checking John R. Lewis High School data. I just left a group, the core planning team, that has 130 community members, including board members, leads from the NAACP, Fairfax Pride, PTAs, our Hispanic Educators, Asian Educators Association, and we have 11 students in the room as well. So student voice, in fact, this morning, right before I left, before our break, it was 4 of our high school students that spoke that I think made the biggest impact on our morning conversation. So we also have a student-focused team as part of the strategic plan. And then, of course, there are our SEALs and our SAC program. So if students want a voice, there's going to be an avenue for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're really incorporating the students' voices into the room where
Yes.
it happens.
Right.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Reid.
Yeah.
After shooting some hoops with Cohen, a member of Lewis's varsity basketball team, Dr. Reid continued her conversation with us in the Lancer Media studio.
One of our students here at Lewis, Taha, wants to know, just a broad question, who are you?
Well, Taha is very curious. I am Dr. Reid, your division superintendent. I am the mother of 4 children and the wife of a firefighter, and recently moved here from the Seattle area, and I've been here 5 months, and I'm just thrilled to be the division superintendent here in Fairfax County.
We're thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
And tell me a little bit more about your time in Seattle. What was it like there, your experience in the North Shore School District?
Right.
And then what inspired the change to FCPS?
So this will be the 5th division I've worked in, the 3rd as a superintendent. And I think the Seattle area has great opportunities. Our family loves that area. And in many ways, North Shore School District that I came from is very similar to Fairfax County. It's one of the most well-known divisions within our state, in Washington State. Very high expectations. Students tended to do academically, athletically, arts, performing, career and technical competitions, FBLA and DECA competitions, really top of class, not just locally, but regionally and nationally. So, and in some cases internationally with our robotics and DECA and so forth. So we, a great deal of pride in accomplishments and a very diverse division. We had 94 home languages spoken and a great deal of, I think, willingness to come together to be a community that cared deeply about one another. And one of the things that drew me to Fairfax County Public Schools is the diversity and the enormous strength that diversity brings. For the problems we have today and the problems we can anticipate in the future, having that diversity of thought is so important. Also, Fairfax County has a very high rate of education. We're very well resourced here in Fairfax County. And I feel like if there's a division in the country that can be a model, a lighthouse, if you will, for the rest of our country, it's here in Fairfax County. And I want to support and sustain that.
I love that. I love that so much. And with diversity being one of the things that brought you here, and we looked at with you winning the National Superintendent of the Year Award in 2021 for specifically your work in closing the achievement gap at your previous school district.
Right.
What are your plans to close the achievement gaps here in Fairfax County?
So great question. I do want to point out to all those young women and young women leaders that it was the first time a woman had won the National Superintendent of the Year in 11 years, over a decade. Awesome. And we still only represent less than 25% of superintendents nationally. Wow. So it would be a fabulous career, I think, for all young students to aspire to, because I think when you have a chance to shape the future, it's the most powerful responsibility and abundantly joyful opportunity, right? I think the things we looked at very closely, and I'm looking at closely here, are access to early childhood. And I'm talking about 3 and 4-year-olds, our preschoolers. And in Fairfax County right now, we are only serving 37% of our income eligible early childhood learners. And that means 63% of our early childhood learners below a poverty level are not getting preschool services. I think that's a huge inequity. Yes. And if we want to be a justice-centered division, we have to have every child coming to kindergarten ready to learn and having opportunities to succeed. Absolutely. I've also looked at our data around students who are successful in algebra at least by 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of work to do. And being in algebra in 8th grade is an Office of Civil Rights track data point for every division in the country. Because we know that if you successfully complete algebra in 8th grade, you're twice as likely to go on to post-secondary school.
Oh, wow.
So those are 2 data points that are right in front of me at the moment, as well as I want to make sure that every 3rd grader is a reader, right? Because we know if we're not readers independently, it's hard to access content as we get older. And then there are all the conversations around academic programs, honors, advanced classes, where is the access, which schools, which pyramids. Mm-hmm. I have a lot to learn about that still.
Definitely. That's awesome and beautiful. And I love those data points. And it sounds like you have a plan to help.
Some pretty clear areas.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. Yeah. As well, when we're talking about like budgeting and for schools, like how is that decision made? We have a question from a student. Mars asks, how do you sort through schools to decide how you're going to budget them? What factors are used to make budgeting decisions?
Well, I think I met Mars this morning.
Yes,
and
you did.
So I appreciate Mars asking that question, because budget is really where you find out not just what people say they value, but what divisions really do value, right? Because you follow the money.
Yeah.
We used to call it money to mission. And so I think one of the things we need to be thoughtful about, and I think do a better job of, is needs-based resource allocation. Mm-hmm. There are some schools that have higher needs for resources, and when we allocate funds equally, then it really creates further inequities. It deepens the inequities. So we want to make sure that as we budget, we look at the needs of our students. Are they in classes that are going to provide them the future they can choose, not a future that we choose for them? And is it possible within the confines of the community to support the activities and events? And I'll give you an example. I was at Annandale High School this week for my last community conversation. And the parents and families talked about their theater program and how hard it was to fund that in Annandale because the PTA wasn't able to raise very much money. Mm-hmm. And then there are other high schools that are able to raise a lot more money that have different sets and costumes and capacities. Mm-hmm. And they talked about that inequity and what was I going to do about it. Mm-hmm. I also had families, I think it was at West Potomac or Mount Vernon, one of the high schools, one of those 2 that spent 18 years raising money for band uniforms, marching band uniforms, 18 years. And then there are other schools that could raise that, in 18 days. So the question is, how do you deal with that inequity across our county? Because we're one Fairfax.
Right.
So those are data points I really am going to work with staff to think about how can we do a better job of that, because the students in marching band at each school put in the same time, have the same talent, and should have the same opportunity for excellence and that feeling of pride.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much, especially here at Lewis. I know our theater program struggles with raising money a lot as well. And I love how that you're focusing not only on like the curriculum and the teaching of each student, but also on the activities and the lives of each student, because the lives of the student is so important. Going along with the lives of the students, mental health is on a decline in youth right now. How do you plan to support students' mental well-being as well going forward?
Big issue. And I think it's too convenient to talk about it related to the pandemic. I think the pandemic amplified it and in some cases deepened the needs, but we were in a crisis before the pandemic. I think number one, when all students, each and every student feels a deep sense of belonging, right? And you know it when you feel it, that deep sense of belonging, mental health is improved. So we really need to work on how we treat one another, how we speak about one another, how we lift one another up or not, at the most basic level. And that's how I talk about our young people and our staff and community, how you talk about your friends and students. So I think that's number one. Number two for me is making sure we have activities that students can access. In other words, more no-cut activities, better funded after-school programs, the fine and performing arts, career and tech, whatever that is, because when students are connected to something they feel meaningful and people that they're connected to, mental health improves. I think we can work on eating well, getting plenty of rest, all of those things to have hopefully more of a preventive approach. Having said that, we're also negotiating right now with a tele-mental health provider so that students will be able to access mental health support actually from their smartphone if they are not able to get in to see a professional. So we're looking at a way to have a much wider net for students to gain support. And finally, I'll say that the students in my last division took this on as their mission. And they created student mental health teams where they took the mental health first aid course, where they learned how to recognize symptoms, what to say to friends when they found them in crisis, and how to build a strong support network. And students trained students. They did it during advisory time, and they actually had space on the website. So it was something students took on as well, not just the adults.
I love that. That's so powerful to see students involved in that change.
Right.
Another thing that students are concerned with is school safety. I know we have a question from Forrest who asks, what can you implement to help keep our schools safe? Would a policy requiring students to carry ID at all times be beneficial for safety?
Well, to answer Forrest's question, I would love to be able to guarantee everyone's safety, but I think I have to stay real. We will do everything we can, but I can't guarantee that. At the end of the day, each of us, unfortunately, has to be vigilant in ways we never had to be before. I don't even know if you were born before the changes in all the flying requirements, right? We have, we used to be able to fly, and our children could walk in and out of the cockpit and see how the plane was flying. And of course, all of that has changed. The idea, again, I go back to the better connected we are as a community, the see something, say something. If you see something on social media, say something, right? I think that's going to be the best way to prevent serious issues. I also think that just being in community, again, just remembering to be kind to one another. It seems so basic, but it's so true. Of course, we have cameras and technology, securities. But to Forrest's specific question about ID, maybe that would create a safer situation. Sometimes it creates a bureaucracy level, though, or a layer of like a good intent. But then if somebody forgets their ID, and then what do? They have to go get another ID, or they can't go to, you have to, sometimes when we solve a problem right in front of us, if we do it quickly, we create more problems. So it might work here, it might not. I can't comment on that specific strategy. But if we know each other, we shouldn't need a card to know each other, right? But I hear what you're saying. It might be easier for someone like I wear mine so that people don't think it's a strange adult walking around, or at least a strange adult without an ID. But yeah, I don't know. It might be a good idea.
Thank you so much for your really in-depth answers, and thank you so much for being here with us today. We're really glad to have you, and really grateful that you're here.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
That's a wrap. That's a wrap.